little over a year ago, I was sitting on a bus, freezing my butt off, riding up a mountain in South Korea on my way to see the Nigerian bobsled team as it made history. I was running on little to no sleep and had hand warmers stuffed places hand warmers should never go. I was just a few days away from closing the chapter on one of the hardest, greatest years of my life. And as I sat on that bus, I checked my email, and I saw a message from my favorite professor back home. She said, "Kat, I've been thinking, and you might want to look into something called Impostor Syndrome. I had it before my first Olympics too, and I think you might relate to it." Professor Michaelis. So naturally, I Googled it, and I was only a few sentences into the Wikipedia page, still on a bus full of strangers, when I started sobbing. Not cute, single tear, looking out a window, sobbing. And I'm usually not a crier, but I couldn't keep it together because I had never understood the phrase, "it feels good to put a name on it," until that moment when an entire year of mental and emotional self-torment was validated. My name is Kat Hendrick, and I am a junior studying sports journalism here at the University of Georgia. And in the few years I've been in the sports media industry, I've been blessed with some once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. Namely, I got my absolute dream job at 19 years old when I was asked to cover the 2018 Olympic Winter Games. And in the year leading up to the games, people were always telling me that it looked like I had it all together. And I'm sure it did. Actually, I know it did. Because in hindsight, I can look back and see that subconsciously, I was working really, really hard to make sure of that. But simmering right beneath the surface was this thing, this imposter syndrome. And it was slowly and secretly paralyzing me. Impostor syndrome was first coined by two psychologists, Dr. Pauline Rose Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes, back in 1978. It's defined as a psychological phenomenon in which one doubts one's accomplishments and lives in constant fear of being exposed as a fraud. It was originally discovered amongst high-achieving women in the academic and corporate worlds, but was soon found to affect all demographics somewhat equally and aggressively. In fact, an estimated 70% of the world population will experience feelings of imposterism at some point in their lives. But it's important to note that the National Institute of Mental Health does not recognize imposter syndrome as an actual diagnosable mental illness. And it shouldn't. It's considered a phenomenon because it's purely situational. If the circumstances in your life are such that it creates an environment in which imposter syndrome can thrive, then congratulations, you might wake up one day convinced you're a fraud. But as those circumstances change or evolve, so will those feelings. You see, imposter syndrome operates in a cycle often referred to as, can anyone guess? The Impostor Cycle. Creative, right? Scientists, you know. And it always starts out with a task or a title. For me, it was getting the job with the United States Olympic Committee, but really it could be anything from getting assigned to a special project at work to opening up your own business. Really just anything that exemplifies your own individual definition of success. And immediately, or shortly after getting assigned that task or title, the doubt sets in. Dun, dun, dun. I actually asked for Jaws music to play when I said that, but they said no. It would ruin the moment. But I think I just did that on my own anyway, so here we are. And this phase is when you start thinking to yourself, okay, who came to work drunk and decided that this would be a good idea? That I was the best person for the job? I was in this phase like 6 minutes ago. I'm kind of in it right now. But like it or not, there you are. And now you have to do the thing, whatever that thing might be for you. And that is when most people go down one of two paths: over-preparation and procrastination. And just sitting there, you probably already know which one you are, right? And maybe your spouse and like your kids. But regardless of whether you worked on this thing for months and months on end, or just kind of thrown it together at the last second. Somehow, some way, it works. You succeed, and for a moment, the weight of all that pressure is lifted off your shoulders, and you're relieved. That is, until you get any form of positive feedback, at which point you discredit your success and chalk it up to either an unrealistic amount of work that you're never going to be able to duplicate or maintain, or just dumb luck. This stage often presents to look a lot like humility, but it's not. You genuinely believe that you only succeeded because of every reason you could possibly think of other than actually acknowledging your own competence. You feel like you accidentally tricked everyone into thinking that you're qualified and worthy of the task at hand. You feel like a fraud. So what do? You get a new task to try to prove to everyone that you're not. But I'll let you in on a little secret. From one imposter to another, no one thinks you are. And in reality, you're just trying to prove it to yourself. Because that's what imposter syndrome is. It's a constant state of irrational paranoia. It's waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for everyone to look up and finally realize that you have no idea what the hell you're doing. You have no idea what the hell you're doing. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. We all don't. But guess what? They won't look up. Because usually, we're all so concerned with our own fraudulence that we rarely stop to consider that maybe we're not the only ones that feel that way. Maybe even those we idolize don't always feel as though they're worthy of their accomplishments. Because yes, the statistics say that it's 7 out of every 10. But I'd be willing to bet that it's really as common as a headache. We all know what a headache feels like, right? I don't have to explain it to you, but I will. It's that annoying throbbing, like right here, or like right here, or like right here. And when you feel it, you might not know what caused it, but you recognize it. And you can call it out and say, that's a headache. And because you can recognize it, you know exactly how to treat it. You drink a Coke, take an Advil, and eventually it fades away. But imagine a world where we didn't know what a headache was because we had never talked about having those feelings. And we were all walking around with that same familiar feeling, but we might not know that A, there's a name for it, B, it's not a brain tumor, and it's actually really common, and C, to take a dang Advil. That there's things you can do to alleviate those pains because you're not alone. And just like a headache, imposter syndrome isn't always that bad. It's only when it's left to run rampant that it can and it will cripple you. I should know. It crippled me. You see, I stopped sleeping because I couldn't justify sleep as anything other than 8 hours that should be spent backgrounding and researching and trying to understand curling. Yeah, do you get the point system? That's what I thought. There were days and even weeks that I didn't leave my house because leaving my house meant running into people, and that meant talking about the Olympics. And that just made all my feelings of anxiety that much worse. I was absolutely terrified of checking my email because I was convinced that every time I hit refresh that was going to be the time that a message popped up from the United States Olympic Committee saying that they finally realized they made a mistake in choosing me, that they had taken a chance on me, and they were wrong. I had full-blown panic attacks on my kitchen floor at home as my sweet, sweet parents called every therapist in the county trying to find someone, anyone, who would try to get through to me. And ultimately, in the month leading up to the games, I was literally dreaming, brainstorming different ways that I could sabotage my entire career, the one that I loved, the one that I had worked so hard for, just so I didn't have to get on that plane. I was so afraid of going and of not being good enough and of disappointing everyone in the process that I didn't want to go at all. I'll never forget a conversation that I had with my dad maybe 2 weeks before the Olympics. Okay, conversation probably isn't the right word. I was having a breakdown. And let me just preface this by saying that as far as I'm concerned, that man walks on water. He is amazing. And by every definition, has had a very successful life. So there I was, rattling off all my usual phrases of, I'm not as good as they think I am, they're gonna fire me and send me home. And finally, he got down on the ground, and he held me. And he said, "Sweetheart, there has not been a single day in my entire career that I have ever felt like I actually earned my success." And that was a powerful moment for me. Once I wrapped my head around the idea that even my hero had ever felt as unqualified and unworthy as I did in that moment. Because even though I was still in a pretty dark place, I was no longer alone in the darkness. I feel like now is the time that I should probably acknowledge that I skipped a lot of steps in my career. In a matter of months, I went from the only sports stories I'd ever written being unpublished homework assignments that I generally got B's on in my intro to sports reporting class, to covering the greatest athletes in the world. My circumstances were extreme, so my imposter syndrome was extreme. But it's rarely ever that debilitating. More often, it's just that little voice in the back of each one of your heads saying, "You are way out of your league here, and it's only a matter of time before everyone realizes it." And no matter what your individual circumstances are, one thing remains the same. You will never overcome your imposter syndrome without first reevaluating where your identity lies. I let my entire identity become Olympic reporter Kat Hendrick. So much so that I was so scared of losing that title or of just being really bad at it because I didn't know what I would be left with if I did. Then I would just be Kat. And for some reason, I just didn't think that that was good enough anymore. As members of this society, we are constantly taught to get the grade, to pass the class, to get the diploma, to get the job, to climb the ladder, and to never stop climbing the ladder to the point where our entire self-worth lies in what we do as opposed to who we are. To combat this, I challenge each and every one of you to root your identity not in your career, but rooted in your calling. Take more pride in your purpose than your position. And don't get so wrapped up in what you're doing that you forget why you're doing it. Because jobs and internships and promotions and raises, they aren't sure things. But your purpose, your calling, well, that can never be taken away from you. So spoiler alert, I got on the plane. I went to the Olympics. I published over 20 articles and had the absolute time of my life. And I wasn't perfect, but I wasn't the failure that I thought I would be. And as it turns out, I was qualified. I was ready. And I like to think that I made some people proud along the way. I know now that I was not put on this earth to be an Olympic reporter. I'm a storyteller. And it is within that calling that I find my purpose, not the title. I just wish I would have understood earlier than I did on that bus ride up that freezing cold South Korean mountain that I am not an imposter because I am more than just my title. And so are you. Thank you.